November 1958, Sheridan, Wyoming. The kind of cold that doesn't apologize. The kind of town that used to hum and has recently gone to a low murmur, like a man trying not to admit he's tired. On the main road, most of the storefronts still have lights in them. But if you know where to look, and some people still do, you'll notice that one of them has a different kind of light. Not the flat white buzz of a modern bulb. Something older, warmer. The color of a fire that someone has been tending for a very long time. That light belongs to Eli Brandt. Eli is 71 years old, and he has opened this saddle shop every single morning for half a century. Rain, snow. The week his wife passed. The winter the pipes froze solid, and he worked in a coat. Every morning at 7 o'clock, the door unlocks, the lamp comes on, and the tools go out in the same order they always have, all to the left, edger in the middle, round knife on the right. A ritual, a discipline, the kind of muscle memory that outlasts reason. Because here is the thing about Eli Brandt in November of 1958. The reason for the ritual has been slipping away from him for years, and in the last 9 days it has stopped altogether. 9 days. No customers, no orders, no bell above the door. He still opens at 7. He still lights the lamp. He still lays the tools out like he's setting a table for a dinner that no one is coming to. And then he sits at the workbench his own teacher built, and he waits in a shop that smells like 50 years of oil and leather and quiet purpose. And the morning passes, and the afternoon follows it, and the bell does not ring. There are things a man can endure in this life. Loss, grief, the hard seasons that peel everything back down to bone. Men like Eli have weathered every version of hard. But there is a particular kind of suffering that belongs only to craftsmen. The suffering of a man who is still capable of the work, who has not lost the skill, who could still do today what he did at 35, and yet finds that the world has simply decided it no longer requires him. That is a wound with no clean name. Eli Brandt is 71 years old, and he is about to close his shop for the last time. He just doesn't know yet that today will be different from the 8 days before it. To understand why this matters, you have to understand what Eli actually does. Not the mechanics of it, not the steps in a process, what it means. A saddle built by Eli Brandt takes 100 hours. Count that out. 100 hours of cutting wet leather in patterns that have to be exactly right, or they'll pull wrong under a rider's weight. 100 hours of tooling, pressing the design into the surface, one stamp at a time, building up an image the way a painter builds up a canvas, except the painter can change his mind, and the leather cannot be undone. 100 hours of hand stitching, tight, and even the needle pulling through twice-punched holes at a pace that has no shortcut. At the end of it, something exists that didn't exist before. Not a product, not a unit, a thing with a personality and a history and a set of decisions baked into it that no catalog can replicate and no machine can approximate. A saddle that a man can ride for 30 years and hand to his son, and the son can ride it 30 more. A saddle where the leather has worn to fit one particular body and no other, where the tooling has darkened with age into something richer than it was the day it left the shop. The pattern Eli cuts is called the Sheridan Rose. It came north with the cattle drives, passed from hand to hand through generations of craftsmen, each one adding something and taking something away, until it settled into the form Eli learned from his teacher and his teacher's teacher before that. It is not just a decorative pattern. It is a lineage, a living thing that requires a living hand to carry it forward. And in the fall of 1958, Eli Brandt is the last pair of hands that knows how to cut it right. The young men have gone to the cities. The factories have dropped the price of a machine-made saddle to $40 a crate. The ranches that used to wait months for Eli's work now order by catalog and receive by freight car, and the saddles they get are adequate and uniform and forgotten inside a season. This is the world that a salesman walked into that morning, 9 days into the silence. The man didn't take off his hat. He moved fast, the way people do when they've given this particular speech before and stopped believing it needs any warmth. He had a catalog. He had a number, $40, machine-made, shipped from back east. He had an offer on the building. He was friendly in the way that people are friendly when they think they're doing you a favor. You'll eventually admit you need it. Times move, he said. Nobody pays for all this anymore. He gestured at the tooled bridles on the wall. The ones Eli had cut one petal at a time. The ones that each held a story, and a relationship and a day of Eli's actual life. And he waved his hand like he was clearing smoke from the air. Eli said 4 words in the whole conversation. "Time's always moved," he said. The salesman left his card, and the bell rang once, and that was the only time all day it rang. Eli stood alone in the shop for a long time after that. Then he started taking the bridles off the wall. He packed them slowly, each one careful, the way you handle a thing you made with your own hands. He knew the story behind every piece. A bridle set for a rancher's daughter who had since moved to Denver. A breast collar for a sheriff who'd been buried in his boots years ago. A small half-size saddle, cut for a boy who now had boys of his own. He laid them into a crate, and the crate received them without recognition. And that was perhaps the sharpest edge of it, that the work could be made with such care, and the world could receive it with such indifference. He told himself it was only leather. He had told himself a great many necessary untruths over 50 years. Out on the highway north of Sheridan, a car pulled to the shoulder. Steam was coming off the hood in thin white columns, drifting up into the November air. The man who stepped out was large across the shoulders, with the kind of physical presence that tends to organize the space around it. He pushed his hat back, looked up and down the main street, and had the particular expression of a man who is somewhere he did not plan to be. He had been driving the long roads, the ones that run between the famous places, through the parts of the West that don't appear in magazines but still hold the shape of something genuine. He was between pictures, and between pictures he liked to drive north and let the land do what it does to a man who has been on a movie set long enough, reset him. Remind him what's real. His engine needed 20 minutes to cool. He had 20 minutes. He saw the sign. Faded paint, the color of old parchment. 3 words in a hand he recognized as a craftsman's hand even from across the street. He saw the lamp in the window, that warm amber light that a man only uses when he takes the work seriously. He saw in the storefront the outline of saddles on their stands, bridles on the wall, the organized interior of a shop that has been tended the same way for a very long time. John Wayne had spent 30 years on horseback for the camera. He could read leather the way some men read faces, instantly, instinctively, with a certainty that didn't require explanation. He knew a hand-tooled rig from a factory piece before he was close enough to touch it. He had developed that eye the hard way, on sets where the wrong saddle could throw off an entire scene, where a wrangler's judgment about tack was the difference between a shot that felt true and one that didn't. And he had been watching these shops close for years. Across the whole sweep of the West, in town after town, the little craft shops were going dark. The old men who knew the old ways were retiring without successors, folding their tools into boxes, selling the buildings to people who would put something else in them. Wayne had played 100 versions of the man who lived in a town like this. He had ridden across 100 fictional versions of this landscape, but the fictional version was being preserved on film, while the real version was disappearing storefront by storefront, generation by generation. He crossed the street. He pushed the door open. The bell rang. Eli looked up from the crate, expecting the salesman again. What he saw instead was a tall stranger in the doorway, backlit, hat in hand. "You still taking work?" Eli set down the bridle. "Depends on who's asking." The stranger stepped into the lamplight, and Eli saw the face, the one that looked down from 100 movie posters, the one that half of America had watched grow from a young cowboy into something like the permanent definition of a certain kind of American character. He didn't say the name. Men of Eli's generation had a rule about that kind of thing. You didn't make a fuss. You didn't treat a man like a monument while he was standing in front of you. Wayne moved through the shop without ceremony. He ran his thumb along the tooling on a finished saddle, not casually, not the way a tourist handles something, but with the slow, attentive touch of a man checking his work. He turned a stirrup over in his hands. He looked at the stitching up close, bending in to follow the line of it. He checked the bevel on the skirt, the burnish on the edge, the way the leather had been finished by hand until it had a depth that no machine process could produce. He had held 1,000 saddles. He had not held one like this in 20 years. "Machine can't do that," he said. Not a question, a verdict. "No," Eli said. "It can't. But it's cheaper, and cheaper is the whole of it now." "Cheaper isn't the whole of anything," Wayne said. "People just forget that for a while. Then they remember. I hope they remember before I'm in the ground." No self-pity in it. Just the plain, level statement of a man who has been waiting patiently for the world to catch up and is beginning to doubt it will. Wayne kept moving. He saw the salesman's card on the bench. He picked it up. He read it. He set it back down face first, with the finality of a man turning over a card he has no further use for. Then he looked up. On the back wall, above the reach of the lamplight, a single saddle sat on a high shelf under a gray dust sheet, set apart from everything else. The way you set apart something you can neither sell nor discard, because it belongs to a category that commerce doesn't quite have a word for. "Bring that one down," Wayne said. "That one's not for sale. I'm not buying. Bring it down." Eli climbed the ladder slowly, the way men of 71 climb ladders when no one is watching. He lifted the saddle off the shelf, and the dust came away in the window light, and he set it on a stand and pulled the sheet back, and there it was. Dark leather, oiled almost to black, gone soft with years of use. The wild rose ran across it in patterns that Eli had cut at 30 years old, when his hands were fast and sure and the work came without effort. The seat was worn pale, where a rider had logged 1,000 miles on it, and riveted to the cantle was a small brass plate, tarnished now, barely legible in the lamplight. Wayne leaned in close. He went still. The name on the plate was Harry Carey. There are moments when the world compresses, when the distance between the past and the present collapses into a single point, and everything you thought you understood about why you're standing where you're standing suddenly reorganizes itself. Wayne stood very still for a long time. Harry Carey was the man who had taught him everything, not his directors, not his producers. Harry Carey, the actor with the quiet face and the unhurried way of moving, who understood before anyone put words to it that the camera rewards the man who does less. Who had taken a young, green, completely out-of-his-depth kid named Marion Morrison and shown him, not with instruction, but with example, how to stand in front of a lens and mean it. The walk. Wayne had borrowed the walk from Harry Carey and built a career on it, the unhurried speech, the particular lonely way of crossing one arm over the chest, a gesture Carey made famous, and Wayne had used 2 years before this moment, at the end of a picture he'd shot while Carey's widow stood behind the camera. Both of them weeping, neither of them speaking about what the gesture meant. Harry Carey had been dead for 11 years, and here was his saddle, made by these two old hands now folded in front of Eli Brandt on a November afternoon in a shop that was 9 days from becoming a storage building. Made in 1936, when the picture business was something else entirely. Ridden in movies, worn to the shape of one man's body, returned after his death to the craftsman who made it, because the family felt it belonged to the hands that built it. Wayne held his hat in both hands. He did not speak. 4 seconds, 5, 6. A man who had stared down every kind of dramatic moment a screenplay could invent, stood in a quiet Wyoming shop and could not locate a single word. Some debts accumulate without your knowledge. You don't notice them building. You carry on and the debt grows and the years pass, and you tell yourself you'll square it somehow, someday, and then someday arrives wearing a disguise. It arrives as a broken-down engine on a road you never planned to travel, in a shop you never planned to enter, in the shape of a brass plate on a saddle under a dust sheet. Wayne had spent his career learning to be the man Harry Carey was on the screen. He had borrowed so much from him. He had never once been able to give anything back. Until now, he did not pull out a checkbook. That would have been kindness. That would have been the easy version. Write a number large enough to solve the winter, drive north, feel good about it. Wayne was capable of that. It would have been enough. Most men would have done exactly that and felt they'd done something real. Instead, he set his hat down on the bench, and he asked a question. What would it take to keep these doors open? Eli shook his head slowly. It's not a money problem. A shop without work isn't a shop. It's a building. Then I'm bringing you work. He had a cavalry picture starting in a few months. A company of riders, dozens of them, each one needing a full set of tack. The studio sourced that equipment by the crate from a warehouse in California. Machine cut and uniform and indistinguishable from any other set of gear. Nobody on the crew thought twice about it. Nobody on the screen would know the difference. But Wayne would know. Every rider in this picture uses your leather, he said. All of them. I'll put it in writing tonight. Eli stared at him. That's 40 saddles. Maybe more, then you'll need help. Hire young men. Teach them the rows. Wayne picked up his hat. A thing doesn't die while somebody's still learning it. It only dies when the last pair of hands takes the knowledge with them into the ground. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said the only thing he could think to say. Why? You don't know me. I'm an old man with a trade nobody wants. Wayne looked at the saddle on the stand, at the brass plate, at the rows carved into dark leather by hands that were 30 years younger the day they did it. Because a man taught me who I was, he said. Taught me how to carry myself, how to hold still when everything's moving. He's been gone 11 years and I never found a way to settle what I owe him. And you're the man who made his saddle. He settled the hat on his head. Seems to me I'm in debt to both of you. This is how I square it. The wire from California arrived the next morning. Confirmed. In writing. Signed. 2 days later, 2 young men came to the door asking about apprentice work. They had heard something, the way things travel in small towns, the way a piece of news finds the people who need it before anyone formally announces it. The bell above the door of Brandt's saddlery started ringing again, and then it didn't stop. Eli Brandt did not close his shop that winter. He did not close it the next winter, or the 20 winters after that. He worked at that bench until he was 90 years old. The cavalry picture came out, and across the country, in darkened theaters, audiences watched dozens of riders cross rivers and chase horizons on hand-told Sheridan leather. Nobody in those audiences knew the old man's name. Nobody knew about a brass plate or a broken-down car or a November morning in Wyoming. They just saw horsemen moving across a wide landscape on gear that looked exactly right. Because it was exactly right, made the way it should be made, built to last. The orders that followed did not stop. 40 saddles became 40 more. The word spread the way it spreads among people who live and work with horses, steadily, reliably, through a network of quiet authority. Ranches that had abandoned the catalog and gone to factory gear started calling again. Men who had laughed at the old shop started waiting months for a spot on the list. The 2 apprentices became 4. The 4 taught others. The Sheridan Rose was carried forward. When Eli passed at 90, his apprentices kept the shop open. They hung one saddle on the wall where it could not be purchased, the dark-oiled one, the old one, the rose worn smooth from decades of hands and weather and 1,000 miles of trail. The brass plate still legible if you leaned in close. That saddle is in a museum in Wyoming today. The card beside it tells you when it was made and who it was made for. It gives you the year and the name. It does not give you the rest of the story. It does not tell you that 22 years after it was made, a man with a hot engine and 20 minutes to spare walked into the shop where it lived and chose not to simply buy it, chose instead to buy the craftsman another 20 years at his bench. Do the arithmetic slowly. 19 more years of work. 40 saddles a year at full production. That is somewhere north of 700 saddles. 700 men who got to own something made by hand, built to last, cut with care by someone who understood that the difference between a good saddle and a great one is not visible to the untrained eye, but is felt in the body every hour of every ride for 30 years. 700 objects that trace back to a brass plate and a dirt road, and a man who understood that the way you honor a debt is not with sentiment, it is with work. John Wayne never told that story publicly. He never attached his name to the order in any visible way. He drove north, and he let the work do what work does when it has a reason: sustain itself, multiply, find new hands. He let an old craftsman believe that the world had simply woken up and remembered him. That restraint, that specific, deliberate absence of credit is maybe the most John Wayne thing about the whole story, because the character he spent his career building was never about the gesture. It was about the result, not the man who announces what he's done, but the man who does it and disappears back into the landscape. There's a line in there for all of us. The salesman with the catalog believed that cheaper was the whole of the argument. He was not wrong about the economics. He was wrong about everything that economics doesn't measure. He was wrong about what it feels like to own something that was built for you by a human being who cared about the outcome. He was wrong about the way a thing made honestly outlasts a thing made efficiently. He was wrong about the specific grief of watching a craft disappear, and the specific joy of watching it refuse to. Eli Brandt spent 50 years building things that lasted. One stranger spent 20 minutes squaring a debt he hadn't planned to find. And somewhere in Wyoming, in a glass case with a small card that doesn't tell the whole story, a saddle holds the shape of everything that happened. The rose is still there, still cut the right way, still made to last. Some things don't die. They just need someone to walk through the door at the right moment, read the room, and decide, not out of pity, not out of sentimentality, but out of a clear-eyed understanding of what is worth saving, to give the work a reason to continue. That's not charity. That's how a craftsman gets paid what he's actually owed.